Hey, what's up, guys? My name is PJ, and today I'm back with book recommendations for Type 8 individuals of the Enneagram. So, the Type 8 are called the challengers, and as the name kind of points to, they're the ones that challenge the status quo. They're the ones that are the rebels, the challengers, the breakers of the system, you can call them, so to speak. A lot of times the type 8 individuals became the way they are because they had to really, early on in their life, they had to really face a very strong, dominant, forceful parent. This is just a possible scenario or possible situation. This doesn't mean that every single type 8 individual that exists became that way because of that. But in most cases, they had a parent that they chose to stand up to because that parent might have been very controlling, might have been very, strong-willed and wanted to enforce their will on the child, on the type 8 child. And that type 8 individual decided that the best way to counteract that forcefulness is to become forceful themselves. So it's interesting because, we might have parents that are like that. Many of us have had parents, one or the other parent that was like that, was, enforcing, controlling. And a lot of times, some types choose to please that parent. Some types choose to ignore or kind of numb themselves to the feeling that they get from that. And some types tend to become, achievers and succeed, and therefore, get the validation from that hard to please parent. But type 8s decide to rebel against that parent, and they decide to say, no, I'm not going to put up with this. I'm not going to deal with you, treating me this way. And they're going to become very forceful. And a lot of times they might just rebel to rebel. They might not really, this is just my understanding, they might not really strongly believe a certain standpoint, but as long as that standpoint goes against the status quo, goes against the the thing that they're being told by, let's say, that parent, they decide to take that stand because it helps them take a strong stance against something. And that's a big word for type 8s, being against, not for something. So by just being against something, they're automatically for something else. But early on, they just realize they get a lot of um, power or a sense of power and joy from being against something. And so this tends to translate into their life, into adulthood, because a lot of these patterns that we learn in Enneagram, they were created within us early on, super early on, in our development years as a child. And then what happens is these patterns end up moving with us through these different stages of ages of different stages of life until we become aware that they're existing within us and that they're driving a lot of our behaviors. And that awareness alone, that awareness of that pattern, shining that light on that pattern, because the pattern is like a shadow in the background, right? And once you shine the light of awareness on that pattern, then you're basically aware that it's almost like, have you seen those movies? I think there's a scene in Men in Black where there's like they open this guy's alien's brain, and there's like a tiny alien within that brain controlling the big, body of this individual. And that little alien, you can call that like the personality programming, that the personality pattern. So let's say if you're type 8, it's almost like you have a small, child, little child, inner child in your voice, the type 8 inner child. And that inner child, that inner pattern is driving a lot of your behaviors. And that child, it's almost like you can be 30 years old, but that child has stayed 8 years old. I'm not saying you're not mature, you're not an adult. A lot of us, we sometimes, especially in stressful situations, we act out of our inner child's needs, because our inner child is constantly trying to speak to us. It's constantly trying to get certain needs met that they might have felt like they didn't get those met early on in their life. And so as we step into our adulthood, it's almost like that inner child, until that inner programming, that inner child, inner programming, until we shine the light on it, it might be trying to get those needs met, by still playing out patterns that are completely outdated. To me, not allowing your personality to, how do I say this? To me, when we have our personality programming, that was the same personality programming that we used early on in childhood. When we have that personality programming driving our behavior as an adult, to me, it's almost like wearing the same pair of shoes that you had at age 8. And let's say you're 28 now, 20 years later, and there's no way you can still fit in those same pair of shoes, but we try. And sometimes we don't even know that we're doing that. So for type 8, what tends to happen is they, they now are moving into new situations, co-workers, relationships, business partners, whatever it might be, right? And that type 8 tendency, that rebellious tendency, that desire to reject control imposed on them from the outside by becoming controlling and powerful and rebellious themselves. And therefore, instead of being controlled, they take the horns, so to speak, the bull by the horns, and they control others with that power. And a lot of times, the type 8s are great. They could be great leaders because their natural instinct is to take charge, is to take control, and is to lead, right? So just like any other types, right? Any other type or any type in general, the thing that could be bad about them is the same thing that can be a superpower of theirs. It's like I'm watching this show on Netflix. It's called the Umbrella Academy. And Umbrella Academy basically has like these 7 primary superheroes, right? And to me, it's fun to like think of the Enneagram as well. It's like, let's say 7 types, right? Enneagram has 9, but 7 types, okay? We have these 7 types that each have their superhero powers, but they have to learn how to harness and use those abilities the best. And there's this one individual, one character, her name is Vanya, and Vanya has been told that she doesn't have powers, has forgotten that she has powers. But she has a very powerful sense of power and ability. And what she's going to do is she needs to learn, first remember that she has that power, which is kind of what Enneagram does for us. Enneagram kind of shows us, like for example, me as a type 9, it shows me that you have this tendency to go with the flow and seek harmony and peace in any situation that you're in, almost to a detrimental effect. But that same thing can be very powerful and utilized as a superpower. You can bring peace, bring harmony, bring ease into different situations. So that Achilles heel of yours can be a superpower of yours. And for type 8s, once they become aware that they can be so good at leading and they realize that they have that power, now they can consciously use that power to lead and to help people, step into their own power, come to a sense of inner power within. Because a lot of us, we don't usually possess the confidence and the aura of leadership that type 8s possess. So that could be the gift that they bring to a lot of us. And another very important thing to remember about type 8s is that little child, the inner child that I was speaking to you about, the child within us resembles the childhood innocence that we once felt, we have. And that innocence, because of the circumstances that a type 8 grew up in, whether it was a cultural circumstance or whether it was a parent that was very forceful and dominating to them, whatever the circumstances were, the type 8 child felt like they had to grow up sooner than most people. They feel like they have to step into an adult role sooner than many of us. And because of that, they felt like they lost that innocence of childhood. And now, underneath their forceful exterior, their powerful exterior, underneath that inner child is the innocence within. That innocence, that vulnerable child within that they're protecting, that they're trying to keep safe. So just like earlier I talked about that inner child within us that's like pulling the strings, well, that inner child is very innocent, and that inner child is trying to protect its innocence. And in each type, you can say that child is trying to find its own worthiness and its own sense of belonging in different ways. So let's say in a type 1 individual, that child is trying to be perfect, is trying to do everything right. Just imagine the burden and the pressure that that imposes on any of us, and any child. And another thing that I find helpful is that when you encounter different individuals, look at them as that child. Look at them as that innocent child. And all of a sudden, when you do that, all the spiritual lessons that different spiritual teachers and prophets have tried to teach humanity, like do unto others as you would have done unto you, forgive others, love your neighbor, all those teachings, all of a sudden when you see other people as that innocent child within them, they become available to us, they become easier to us. And so the point of what I'm saying is that inner innocent child within type 8s, that innocence is something that they've tried to protect. They're trying to protect that innocence by becoming almighty, all-powerful individuals. Deep down, they really seek for someone or a place where they can be that innocent self, where they can be that inner child, that they can drop the exteriors of powerfulness, they can drop their desire to be in control, they can drop all that, and they can fall back into being innocent. It's interesting that the type 8 goes to type 2 when it's integrating, and type 2 is called the giver or the helper. It's the type that seeks to help, seeks to serve other people, seeks to, almost like you can say to a fault, put its own needs aside so that it can attend and serve the needs of other people. The type 8, this powerful individual, at their best, they go and become that servant leader. You look at someone like Martin Luther King Jr., who most likely was a type 8. That person, when they give a speech, there's so much power within that, right? That power was now being utilized in the service of love. They're using their personality, they're using their abilities, their power, their leadership qualities, all for the service of love, for helping other people. So that's completely showing a type 8 integrating the type 2 aspect. And a lot of times that point, because each Enneagram goes to another point when it's feeling great or when it's stressed out. So it goes to one point when it's integrating, and it goes to another point when it's disintegrating. Type 8 goes to type 2 when it's integrating, and it goes to type 5 when it's disintegrating. So when it goes to type 5, it becomes emotionless, you can say. It's like a powerful machine that lacks emotion. It's like becomes very stoic. My girlfriend actually is a type 8, and I've seen this happen. If there's an argument within us, it's frustrating for other people like myself, because it's almost like there's nothing you can do that would inflict any emotional pain to them, because they become so cold. Not that I would want to do that, but I'm just saying it's like I've seen that move happen in first-hand situations. But I've seen the opposite happen too. When a type A goes to type 2, when it's integrating, these are some of the most loving change agents that the world has ever seen. And they have powerfully combined their power with love, and combining those two, they're unstoppable. The point that each type goes to integration. So in this case, for type 8 being type 2, that point, what it means in one tradition of Enneagram, it means that these are qualities that early on in childhood stages of development, in our childhood, in our early years of life, these qualities that we're now trying to reintegrate back into us, these qualities were qualities that we felt like we have to let go of. We felt like because of our circumstances, these qualities are not serving us to get our needs met. And so we let go of them. So for type 8, those type 2 qualities are the desire to help, to serve, to seek to meet the needs of other people above one's own needs. Um, those qualities, a type 8 individual might have felt that they need to let go of those because the situations that they're in don't really foster and create the good grounds, good soil for them to be able to use those qualities, to they might have been in such a rough environment that if they were all helping and loving and trying to serve other people, that might have not gotten them to get their needs met. And what would have been a much more powerful and better way of getting their needs met was to be powerful. So I like 50 Cent a lot, and I have read two of his books. He has one book that he's written himself and another book that he's written with the author of 48 Laws of Power. So the Hustle Harder, Hustle Smarter, that's the 50 Cent's book that he wrote himself. I was listening to that, and when he's talking about his childhood, I think 50 Cent is a great example of being a type A. In his childhood in Queens, New York, the situation that he grew up in was so difficult and challenging that he had to become, a powerful individual from a very early age. I mean, the show he's produced is called Power, and he has this aura of power. He's gotten shot 9 times or 8 times, didn't die. Power, power, power. That's the theme that keeps playing in his life. And so listening to his story, you can easily see why someone in that environment would choose to become powerful and forceful versus overly compassionate and loving and serving, because they knew in that environment that's not going to do the job, that's not going to get their needs met. So that actually brings me to the reason that I chose the books that I chose to recommend for type 8s, because these books are directed towards helping type 8 individuals get back in touch with those lost elements of childhood, the child heart point, some people call the type, the type that is the integration type. Those elements are the elements that the books that I'm going to recommend today are aimed to help type 8s get in touch with. Innocence, vulnerability, love, service, all those things are things that these books will help type 8s get to. So, first book. I've already recommended a lot of books by this author, in these series of videos that I've made. But, I think it doesn't matter how many times you recommend books from this person, they are helpful in every case. And so this book, I think it's actually an audiobook, but I'm sure the book actually is, in paperback as well. But it's by Brene Brown, a very famous shame researcher. I think she's a type 1 herself. So she's in the body types of the Enneagram, you can say. And this book is called The Power of Vulnerability. Power of Vulnerability, just as the name implies, it's all about finding power within what type 8s might feel as a powerless state, which is being vulnerable. In order for us to have genuine, real connection with other people, to have love, to have compassion, to have union with other people, we need to be able to be vulnerable. As long as we have a shield up, we won't be able to connect with people authentically. Shields get in the way of us getting close. And in order to get close to other people, we have to drop those shields. We have to drop those guards and drop back into our hearts and be vulnerable and be childlike, and from that state connect to other people. This book will definitely help type 8s do that, and it's a book that has helped many, many people. I think it was a TED talk that Brene Brown did on gifts of vulnerability or power of vulnerability or something like that went viral for her, and that led to all the other books by her that are about vulnerability. And this book is phenomenal, and I think it's a great starting point for us before we get into the other books that I have to recommend today. It's a great starting point to if you just listen to that, or if you just read that one book and realize that there's power in vulnerability. Strength has power also. But the power that comes from vulnerability is a power that is beyond this world. It's a power that helps us connect to others in a way that just being strong all the time won't help us do. So that's a great first starting point, and then from here we're going to go to the other books that I have for us today. So the next book, this is the first time in this entire series that I've done this, but I'm going to recommend 2 books from the same author in one video. This next book is, again, by Brené Brown. It's called The Gifts of Imperfection. I actually have it right here. She's releasing the 10-year anniversary edition of this book next month in September. So this cover is probably going to be outdated very soon. But The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown. This book, well, actually, let me just read the subtitle. It says, "Let go of who you think you're supposed to be and embrace who you are. Your guide to a wholehearted life." Again, this goes very hand in hand with her other book, Power of Vulnerability, because so you decide to be vulnerable. This book is primarily, I don't want to say primarily, but it's a lot about shame, as most of Brené Brown's research is about shame. She's a shame researcher. So this book, one of the things that it helped me really see is, okay, so you decide to be vulnerable. Like, great, I'm going to open up now. So you open up yourself and you put yourself out there, you become vulnerable, and then boom, somebody says something, somebody does something in response to you being vulnerable that triggers shame. That great old friend that neither of us likes to deal with, that it comes back up for most of us in different circumstances in life, and sometimes it seems so out of place. Somebody says something that, let's say, is this small of a thing, but the way it gets internalized within us is like a massive, rage-filled, shame-triggered reaction that we're like, where did that even come from? What within me was already there that thing that they did or said triggered that to that extent? So when a situation like that happens, what we need to have is what Brené Brown calls shame resilience. And shame resilience is our ability to be resilient against shame attacks that we either do to ourselves, shame ourselves, or that something happens and it causes shame within us. How to become shame resilient. So the reason I wanted to recommend this book was because, keep pointing over here as if you guys can see what I see. The reason I keep recommending this book is because once you become vulnerable, once you put yourself out there, you might actually get some feedback to that causes shame. And then once that happens, especially a type 8 individual that has learned to protect themselves and their innocence from being hurt by being vulnerable, what you need to know and the skill set that you need to have is shame resilience, because you're vulnerable, somebody says something, it triggers shame, and then you're like, see, I knew I shouldn't be vulnerable. I knew that this is a dead end road that I should not get on. But that's when a book like this comes in and helps you with shame resilience, because it's better to live vulnerable and love fully and truly than to never lay your guards down and open your heart and have long-lasting, fulfilling relationships and connections in your life. So it's worth it every time, even though sometimes it might hurt. What's that saying? It's better to have loved and been hurt than to have never loved at all, or something like that. I might be butchering it, but I think that's what the quote says. So Brené Brown, double whammy books, both of them are amazing. So next book I want to recommend is, just before I go into that book, it's Basket. My girlfriend's basket is the magical book basket. So never know what's going to come out of this basket when I open it up. But the reason I'm recommending all these books, first and foremost, is because I think it's so powerful for type 8s to get back to love, to return to love. and really return to that childhood innocence and a state of trust and faith in the universe that they had in their childhood, that they felt like they have to let go of in their early stages of development. It's so enriching for their lives to get back to that. And that's why I'm recommending this book again for the billionth time in this series, because I feel like it's going to help any of us from any type make that sweet return back to love. That's why we're going to recommend A Return to Love. I didn't know how many times I can make a reference without you guys finding out what I'm saying in one sentence, but hopefully that wasn't too cheesy and we can all return to love again. Anyways, this book is by one of my favorite authors, Marianne Williamson. This book completely changed my outlook on the idea of God, the idea of faith, and so many things that are, along that same concept. It truly was an opening to me to trust and faith and to love and to prayer, to trusting in the universe, in God. And I know that for a lot of type 8s, this book can be very helpful because it helps you. I honestly think Marianne Williamson, I don't want to say she's a type 8, but she is probably has some sort of 8 in her because she has a lot of that rebellious qualities. And that's why when she speaks about her own experiences and her own return to love, it hits home differently for those of us that have that rebellious quality within us, that quality that kind of wants to hold on to control, not open itself to like surrendering and letting the flow of life take us where it needs to. And in other words, letting God's will be done instead of our own. Type 8s are really good at allowing their will to be done, but it's a challenge to allow a bigger will than theirs to be done, an infinite intelligence's will to be done through us, we being used as conduits by that force, by that energy field, by God, to serve others. It takes courage to do that for type 8 especially, but once they allow themselves to let go of their own control and instead allow themselves to be open to receiving guidance and instructions from a higher will and carry those out, they can carry those out with so much power and love and grace and passion that can completely change the world. You look at another, a person that I've already mentioned his name, MLK Jr. You look at a person like that. That person was inspired by a power bigger than himself to use his human power combined with the power of that force and then create massive, long-lasting change in the history of the world. That's the power that type 8s have. Once they allow themselves to be guided by that will, by that intelligence, they are unstoppable change agents in the world. And this book will help you do that. Have you ever heard this quote? Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. Well, a lot of people think that is by Nelson Mandela, but it's not. It's by Marianne Williamson. It's from A Return to Love. This is the book that quote came from. So, can't recommend this book enough. I've been rereading it for like the 1000th time in the past 4 years. And depending on what part of your journey you're in, this book will speak to you differently. Like, for example, the chapter on work was, a great chapter always, but now that I'm kind of more concerned with that area of my life, the chapter on work has just been speaking so much wisdom and goodness to me that I can't get enough. So, can't recommend this book enough times. The next book is a book that I believe I've already recommended in, I think it might have been Type 3's video, but I'm going to recommend it again here because just like Type 3's, Type 8s have a desire to hold on to control, and they know on a gut, like deep level, what they want and how to go get that. But they know what they want, right? They might not know what the divine wants for them. That oftentimes can surprise us and blow our minds by what it can give to us versus what we think we want. How many times have you said, I want X, Y, and Z, or this thing or that thing, and then you get it, and you're like, wait a minute, I didn't think this is gonna feel this way. Like, I thought it's gonna feel better. I thought that this is gonna make me happy. But a lot of times, when something like that happens, to me, it's just a testament that it's almost like there's an intelligence that knows us better than we know ourselves. And if we allow ourselves surrender to that knowledge, that knowing, our lives become like a walking miracle. It's amazing, what could happen that we couldn't even imagine. And so for you type 8s listening right now, everything I just said might be so woo-woo and out there, and so like, what is this guy talking about? But I encourage you to check out this book and the story within this book. It's called The Surrender Experiment by Michael A. Singer. He's the author of The Untethered Soul as well. And this book is describing Michael A. Singer's desire and choice to let go of his control and what he knows is best for himself and allow a higher intelligence guide his life. So he surrendered to that field, to God, really, to a higher intelligence, and allowed the universe to guide his life based on an intelligence way beyond our own. So for type 8s who love to have control, love to know how things go, love to, make excuse my language, make shit happen, if they can learn how to surrender, it's going to be one of the greatest accomplishments of their life. Because if a type 8 individual can let go of control, that is amazing. I've seen what can happen, the beauty and the gifts that can come from that state within the type 8s, because I am in a relationship with a type 8. And so I know when she surrenders, when she lets herself to be led and guided, she can be such a loving light, truly goes to that integration path to the life of everybody else around her. And babe, if you ever watch this video, you're always like that. But the Surrender Experiment, it talks about Michael A. Singer's journey with surrendering, and it was truly eye-opening for me to see Michael A. Singer's, see his dedication to surrender, see his dedication to letting go of control. And situations that if I were in those situations, I would be, gosh, who knows what I would do. But definitely to the extent that he let go of control and surrendered, it's incredible. And to see what transpired from that is just unbelievable. And I found in my own life the best decisions that I've made have been because I decided that I'm going to surrender, that I'm going to allow myself to be shown what I don't know, what I haven't seen yet, what I don't even know I want, but I deep down deeply want on a soul level. Surrender, allow myself to be shown, to be revealed what that is, to be revealed what my part to play in this world is, instead of trying to figure out what my purpose is by myself. Allowing myself to be shown what part I'm here to play. This has led to some of the most beautiful moments of my life and some of the most powerful experiences that I've ever been a part of, that of my own strength I couldn't do. And so I have seen and experienced the power of surrender firsthand, and I know for type 8s, if they can tap into that energy of surrender, tap into that state, not only it's going to get them back in touch with their innocence that they are so deeply yearning for, but it's going to be enriching to the lives of everybody else that they encounter. So I hope that you guys check these books out. Please let me know in the comments if you have read any of them, or if you got them because of this video, and if they helped you. That would mean the world to me. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back next week with the last book recommendation video in the series, which would be for my type 9s. So type 9s, check it out. I'm excited for me to talk about books that impacted my own life tremendously, and it's almost like they just knew to save this type for last because, you know, it's just building up that excitement to come and share. I'll be back. Please, if you like this, like, subscribe to my channel. More videos about the Enneagram coming out soon. Thank you. Bye.